live with another chat with Corin. I'm here with the old buddy of mine, Jess. We went to college together, and we were just saying before we got on air, it's been a while, but it doesn't really feel like it. We were mentioning that through social media and through just following people back and forth, whether Facebook, Instagram, you follow people's lives, and while we haven't really spoken directly for a couple of years, you still feel like you know someone. So I've been following along, and this is almost, I rock my Cortland hoodie today.
Dude,
Shout
I got
out Red
the hat.
Dragons. Yep, had to do it. The way I've been following you on social media, not in a weird way, is sort of similar to how I remember you in college. Like, I feel like we were close. We had classes together. We were acquaintances, knew each other. But I never really got to know you too well. So I felt this was a good opportunity to talk to you, understand what you're doing a little bit more, because I know you have a podcast with your wife, which is amazing. I've been listening to. So welcome to Corin's World, and how you been?
I've been good, man. Thanks for having me. I love what you're doing here. I love the platform. Super stoked to be on. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's been a couple of years. I was trying to think back about how we actually met, like the actual interaction, but I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Other than we went to college together, we had the same major. We ran into each other, and I know that we ran into each other at an interview once. Do you remember that? We were.
Was that the Westchester Knicks or no?
Yeah, we were
Wow.
after college. It was after college. I went to an interview for the Junior Knicks, and I looked to like my right, and there you are sitting now, interviewing for like one of the roles.
Yeah.
So it's insane how like our paths have crossed. And similar to you, yeah, like social media just keeps us all connected, and I've been following you, everything from college, and now you have your own family, and it's beautiful. So super stoked to be here and to catch up, and to talk a little bit more about like what I've been doing.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting you bring that up, because it's like I feel like there's so much that like college to me. I transferred over to Cortland. Were you there for 4 years?
Yeah.
So what was your path to Cortland? Because I knew for me, Cortland just drew my attention because there was a big sport management program. Phys ed is big at Cortland, and it seemed just like a sporty school. And one thing that I think drew my attention to you was that I think we had the same major. I think you were a sport management major, right?
Yep.
But you seemed sporty, you had some swag, you had confidence, and I was just like, she seems like cool people. So like, I think we just gravitated on that type of like, hey, you're cool. Hopefully you think I'm cool. We say what up to each other. What was your path to Cortland, and what drew you to like the sports world initially?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it's interesting. My dream school was always to go to Syracuse University. Like all my homies in high school were like, that's where we're gonna end up. But when I got to high school, I rebelled a little bit my freshman year, and I thought it's cool not to go to class. I recall having like a super low average just because I never went to any of my classes, and that really like fucked me up, man. It just screwed up my GPA, and it was unfortunate because I always did really well in school. I think the amount of freedom that I have, and when you go to high school in New York City, you have to apply to schools. And so I went to one of the top business schools there, and it was 45 minutes from home.
Wow.
I'd start school at like 7 a.m. I'd end at like 4 p.m. And there was, prior to that, I went to a junior high school that was they kind of ran their school like a military. Like you had to, after you got out of class, you had to walk a certain way to your next room. Like it was all like single file. For lunch, like you'd sit in the auditorium until they called you for lunch, and you'd be listening to like classical music. So like they were just constant. They had the resources to watch over all the students, right? The ratio of teacher to student, I couldn't tell you, but it was much better than my high school. And so when I went to high school, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I don't have to go to my next class, So I ended up just doing my thing, and after that, my mom found out. She wasn't happy with that. She whooped my ass.
Found out what?
that I basically failed out of like all of my classes.
Oh, okay.
My first semester. And she was like, "What do you mean you haven't been going to school?" And she literally whooped my ass. She was like, "You're not doing this. You're not throwing away your future." And I had decided to go there because they had an awesome computer science program. And I also played ball. I went there because they were the top women's basketball team in the city. And so that was the dream, right? I was going to play ball. I was going to get, all these colleges were going to look at me. And just after that, like when you screw up with your classes, no coach wants to coach you. And so anyway, I did that. And then as I was, going through high school, I couldn't really get my average back up to what I needed to, no matter how well I did. It just, that one semester really just screwed me. And so I had to start looking at other schools. I didn't get into Syracuse. And sport had always been such an important part of my life. And so I was like, okay, I don't really know what I want to do, but I know that, sport has been my first love, and like, I'd love to be in that world. At first it was like, oh, let me be a Jerry Maguire, right? Let me learn that world. I think that's what a lot of us had in mind. But
you were always interested. You were always interested about sports growing up.
What was interested?
No, you were always interested in sports growing up.
Yeah.
Was that something that was easy for you, being a girl, being in the city? Was it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, I guess looking back on it now, it wasn't easy. I look at it now as like the norm, but I was usually the only chick on the court, and I was always playing with older guys. I had a few coaches who always told me play with older folks, play with the guys, and at first guys wouldn't want to like take me serious. They wouldn't want to be too rough on me. But after a while, they just got tired of me like scoring on them or schooling them or whatever. So, it got easier as people started getting to know me. And, I was that athlete from in the neighborhood that was like, yo, she's going to make it. Like, she's nice. So that was always just like my escape. And it was a big part of my identity, to be honest with you. So yeah, I wanted to do that. That was the dream. And then, as reality started hitting, and I didn't take school that serious. I wasn't really, I was like, all right, well, what schools are out there that offer these sport management programs? Because Syracuse has one. But because I wasn't going to have the grades for that, I started looking at state schools. And I saw that Cortland was one of like the top sport management programs out there. And so, yeah, I applied. I was super grateful and blessed to get in. And yeah, that's where I landed, man. And where we met.
Was it my brother taught in the Bronx for people that know, you're originally from the Bronx, correct?
I'm from Washington Heights.
Okay, Washington Heights.
It's right next to the Bronx. I'm right by the GW Bridge, so 181st.
Okay. So for people that don't know, for people listening outside of New York, it's a tough spot to grow up. There's people are hard nosed, they're gritty. There's a lot going on. Did you find it was hard to navigate through the New York City school system and like apply to college and get out of like the city?
Oh, for sure, dude. Yeah, I mean, my neighborhood now is way better than it was. Like, everything's being gentrified in New York and in most cities. But yeah, at the time, man, like, I knew all the gang members on my block. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew all the drug dealers. Mm-hmm. I went to school with them, and you basically had to be cool with these guys in order to like make sure you were safe. Mm-hmm. And so I was very fortunate that, my boys took care of me. But yeah, I mean, the school system, I was fortunate that I went to that junior high school, which was pretty good, but my high school was shit, man. Like, it was the top business school, but again, they didn't have the resources. And, if you weren't the top student, so actually me and my wife met in high school. Okay. We didn't start dating till after, but my wife was, I think, top 10 in our class. She went to an Ivy League. Like, she had, all the teachers kind of providing her those resources because, I get it. As a teacher, as an educator, you got to put your resources into the people that are dedicated to it and trying to get as many kids out into like the best schools. And so her and I had a completely different experience, even though we went to the same high school. She's from Harlem. I'm from Washington Heights. They're both pretty rough neighborhoods, mm-hmm. But yeah, it was super hard to navigate. I had to being first generation as well. You know, I'm Latinx, and I grew up with a single mom, and I'm the oldest of two. So I have a younger brother who's 5 years younger. I had to figure it out: financial aid, you know, how to get to school, like, you know, applying for a credit card, everything that it took to like get to where I needed to get. I had to navigate that and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I give you props because I've got a couple boys from the Bronx and just from the city in general, even from Westchester. And I feel like there's this thing with New Yorkers there. It's just like, I give you props for even going away to college. Like, I've got people that won't leave the city, who won't leave like the apartment they're from, just because it's like they have that comfort of being with, you know, whether it's their parents or whoever's helping them, or just knowing the trains or how to get around. So when you ultimately went to college and you were at Cortland, what was your experience like there? How was like, you know, adapting to college and being there?
The culture shock.
Because like I said, I knew you, and I just listened to one of your podcasts recently, your most recent one, which was, I think it was, like, I don't know, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable or something like that. And you had mentioned in college you had like this like persona you had on your face that was sort of like this gangster Jess, like, this is who I am. And that's what I remember about you. But what did you experience in college, and what did you ultimately, you know, take away from that?
Yeah, so, you know, being from the city, like, Washington Heights is filled of Dominican people. So, you know, my background, my mom is Ecuadorian and Mexican, and my dad is my mom is Ecuadorian, my dad is Mexican and Cuban. And so, you know, being part of like the Latinx culture, you're just around all your language, the food, all that stuff. And like New York City is so diverse, right? So it's just all types of people. And so when I went up to Cortland, away from the city, as you know, Cortland is like this small town in central New York, you know, surrounded by greenery, farms, and all that. And so I go to this school, and it's a culture shock, not only from like the environment, but also just me being like the only Latinx person in my dorm like hallway. I think at the time, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 4% Latinx people that went to that school. And so it was just a shock because I was around all these like white people, and I'm like, shit, like I'm this like unicorn amongst all these folks. Like, so I'd get a lot of those questions like, what are you? I hate that question. Don't ask people that. And
I feel bad because I'm always asking. I actually just did that recently this weekend.
It's better to just say, what's your cultural background? But, you know, learning at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I knew what they meant. So it was just a huge shock for me. And then I think an even bigger shock for me is like my sexuality. I started exploring that even more. So as much as it was crazy and different, like I'm so blessed to have gone there. I think touching on the episode we just talked about, like you learn so much about yourself when you're uncomfortable because you have to dig into who you actually are, what you like, who you want to be around, the type of conversations you want to have. And being in that, it really forced me to like uncover all the shit that either I've been suppressing or that I had to learn. So making a whole, I went to school, I didn't know anybody there. So just learning how to make friends and like going to school and following a syllabus and, you know, being the one Latinx person in the classroom and just navigating that and being away from like the foods I eat and the languages I speak. So yeah, it was an interesting time. I will say that.
Yeah. So what's some of the stuff that you like? Did you have some difficult experiences of people asking you what you were or whatever like that you had to overcome? Like you mentioned your sexuality, you mentioned your ethnicity and stuff like that. Like to me, that's not stuff that I have to think about. You know, like people know I'm white. You know, like I don't know. Like what are some things that you had to navigate through that maybe made you understand people differently or realize? Because I've learned so much about different people, whether it's at college or abroad or something like that. Some people are fucked up, some people are cool, some people aren't. Like, what are some of the things that you learned?
Totally. So I think for me, you know, I would get things like, I remember this one chick, she asked me if I got in through affirmative action.
Wow.
Like straight up. And I'll never forget that because I literally looked at her and I'm like, bro, I have a better GPA than you.
Yeah.
Like, I have a better GPA than you. But anyway, yeah, I had to deal with like questions like that, or, you know, people using the term spick. I remember I almost like knocked a girl out once. She was she was my neighbor and she thought she was being funny. And she said that, and I went and I grabbed the Swiffer and I chased her down and I literally grabbed her and I put her up with the Swiffer by her neck. And I was like, you will never use that word with me again.
Good.
Like, that is so offensive.
Yeah.
And she never did, but like, she thought it was funny because she was like, oh, we're cool. It's like, no, we're not, that's not okay to say.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of like that they were using all these like microaggressions that, you know, they didn't think I'd pick up on, or just because they thought we were cool that they could do. But yeah, it was a lot of that, and just like trying to understand what my cultural background was, like who I actually was, because I didn't look like everyone else. So people would find different ways to ask me that, or just make sure that I knew that I was like the unicorn in the room. So yeah, it was a lot of that, dude. Like, and now it's like, I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I actually went through that, but it's the world we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
know?
it makes you appreciate things a lot more, and put things in perspective that, I mean, like, I would never like know what that's like for someone to say like a slur to me or something like that, but I feel like a lot of the times those situations, like, I mean, I feel like, me personally, I try to like brush off a lot of shit that people say, whether it's negative or positive, you know, like, just because at the end of the day, that's on them, you know. So like, she's gonna have to live with saying that and understand that, you know, she's got to learn from that. That's gonna fuck her up more than it'll fuck hopefully you up, because you're a stronger person, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think you know, and you also have to think about, this is what I think about. It's like, you know, living in Trump's America right now, right? Like, a lot of the people who are saying this are people that have never been around different people, right? So the person who said that, it was from Syracuse, New York. You know, she grew up in the country. Her family definitely uses the N-word. They weren't around people. And so, like, not to give them a pass or anything, but like, that's why they said that. It's an educational piece. And, you know, I look at that now, and I decide now as an adult, like, who I interact with. Like, that's not someone I would interact with, right? Because I'm not going to sit here and I'm not spending my time educating other people. That's up to you.
Yeah.
So I like to reflect back on that, because there's still a lot of people out there that talk like that, even in 2020, you know? And
I feel like those interactions, although they're terrible and they're horrible for not only you, but other people that hear it, but they're necessary to be heard. Like, people need to hear that, like, there's people that still think this way. Like, I've sort of started to get into politics a little bit more. I'm actually watching the debate right now, and like, we live in such a polarizing time that, like, you can't just defriend all of your Trump supporter friends that you see on Facebook. Like, you need to see the fucked up shit they're saying to make you understand that, like, you know, there's still people that are fighting these wrong battles, that if you just erase everybody, you know, and live in this perfect world, then you're just blocking away, like, you're faking, you know, like, you're trying to think that these people are not out there when they really are. So I don't know, I try to hear the other side of what people are saying and try to understand where they're coming from, because maybe there could be a conversation had to hopefully change them or make them understand that what they said was hurtful or wrong. And that's what I've been starting to understand with this whole, like, the whole political system with Trump supporters. And some people come around. I mean, like, I'd be curious if that, you know, that girl has changed her mind on how she's spoken about things.
Likely not. I dated her sister, so she's not really happy about that.
So some people are just salty.
Yeah.
But to round out the college, so you graduated from Cortland, and then you started working in New York. I know you mentioned we had a couple job interviews. Well, we had that same job interview, which is funny because I sort of felt bad for the other people there, because I had worked for the Knicks for a couple of years before that, and knew that they were only hiring like 2 people. And one of the kids that they hired, like, I was told was like already going to get the job. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
It's crazy that like we go to college for all these years, we spend so many times in classes, and then are at a job interview that basically we're both shit out of luck and not going to get something. And it happens to so many kids nowadays. And
Yeah, that's rough.
I don't know what you're doing now, but what did you do when you graduated college? What did you land up on? And because it's tough for kids to get jobs.
Yeah, especially in the industry, in the major we major in, right? So few and far in between. Yeah, so when I graduated, so I had a minor in computer applications, and I grew up poor. So for me, finance and like being financially stable has always been top of mind. And so when I graduated, I was like, shit, I got a lot of debt, because I didn't get much help, surprisingly enough. Like, single mom living in New York, you'd think I'd get a lot of money, but I didn't. So I had to really look at that and just make a decision. Do I go after my passion, or do I set myself up so that I can live a better life than, I was able to as a kid? And so I took a job at a hedge fund, funny enough. So I was working on a trading floor in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Wow.
With a lot of Republicans.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure you didn't see too much diversity there, right?
Oh, no, I was the only female on the trading floor. I saw a lot of fucked up shit. I heard a lot of stuff. But it was an experience. And, at the time I got the job offer, they offered me like 6 figures. I was 23 years old, making 6 figures. I was like, all right, I'm going to sell my soul for 2 years, and I'm going to pay off my debt and take care of my mom, and then I'm going to quit. Like, literally is what I said to myself. And 2 years later, that's what I did. Wow. So I paid off my student debt, and my mom was in some debt, so I took care of that. And then I was like, you're good now. Like, you took care of me, I'm taking care of you, and like, now I can go follow my passion. They weren't happy when I left because, I like to think that like my work ethic is my work ethic. Like, I put everything I have into work. And, I was really good at my job. I was on the tech side of things. So after that, I was like, I can afford to be poor, I guess. So I actually went to work for New York Roadrunners, who produced the New York City Marathon, along with 50 other events. So again, it's shifting back into like the sports world, and event management is where I wanted to be. And yeah, dude, I crushed it there. As a humble brag here, like, I wanted to work there so bad just because I saw the stuff they did, and I really grew there. I started out as like a junior event person, and I left there 4 years later as a director managing a team of 12.
Wow.
So, talk about the growth that happened in just 4 years. Everything that I could want. And so I got to learn everything. Like, New York City Marathon is like the Disney World for adults.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to like work. I would work with, city officials, NYPD, the mayor's office, like celebrities, a bunch of influencers, a bunch of brands. So I got to learn a lot. And then my wife actually got a job out in San Francisco. And so I couldn't do my job from San Francisco. So I actually had to quit, which was hard for me because I've never left a job without having a job. So it was a lot of reflecting, and I really had to calm my ego down because it was an ego shot for me. It's like, I'm about to give this up, everything that I just worked for. But it was the biggest blessing, man. It really, being uncomfortable allowed me to grow in ways that I can't even describe. I've grown more in the last 2 years than I think I have in my entire life, just being in a different place, knowing nobody, building your network, and just out here, it's all about the tech companies. Like, out here, when you meet someone, they ask you, what company do you work for? Like, what tech company? Like, that is literally the conversation.
It's almost like the what's your ethnicity question. It's almost just like, don't ask me that shit. Like, ask me my name or some shit first, or ask me something other than, like, what do you do? That's the question I fucking hate as a white person, is where do you work or what do you do? It's just like, fuck you.
Well,
like,
because I think that for us, I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's more than just an American thing, but it's like our jobs are a lot of it's our identity for a lot of people. And so I think that's the way people connect. But yeah, I totally agree. I hate that question too. And so I actually stopped asking that question because I was faced with that, and I'm like, this is uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I networked so much, dude. I was putting myself out there in ways like I'd go to networking events and I'd walk up to CEOs and be like, this is why you need to hire me. Like, it's crazy. I would never do that. But I'm like, I have to figure this out. I have to transition into like this tech world. And so I actually landed a role working at Lyft as a creative producer.
Nice.
So, I produce all their live events and activations. I this past year, I helped them. I produced the Pride campaign. That was a national campaign in the U.S. and Canada, which was super humbling. And yeah, I travel all the time to help produce these things. But going back on like my event management experience, I really was able to flex those muscles here and do that. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for the past, I guess, 6 years.
That's wild. So just to take it back to before you went out to California, when did your wife come into play? Because like, when did you guys meet? When did you guys figure out while you were working at Roadrunner that you were going to make the move to California? Talk about your wife, and how
Sounds
that in New York. Because I'm sure that wasn't easy to make a decision to move out with her and all that stuff.
No, yeah, it was a big conversation. So like I mentioned, we went to high school together. We went away to different colleges. We had never dated before that. And we got invited to a mutual friend's going away party that we both weren't even going to attend, but we were like, oh, we'll go. And so we reconnected there, and we were both going through our own breakups. And yeah, dude, we started hanging out. And since we were back in the city together, we just started getting to know each other as adults. And the rest is history, man. We started dating then, and have gone through our journey and have helped each other through different life decisions, from career to family to moving. And so my wife has a background in so many things. She's like in marketing and sales and everything, and she's constantly growing in her career, and so she's constantly on the move. And she works at Google, and so she was in New York working there, and we had always talked about moving to San Francisco. And she had this opportunity that popped up, and she's like, do you want to do this? And I was like, shit, I guess we have to figure this out. And we had she found out, I think it was June 1st. We had like 3 weeks to move. Wow. We had a few days to decide because she had an offer on the table. And her current job in New York made a counter offer, and so she had to like kind of figure that out. But we had 3 weeks to move, and so we had to fly out here, look at apartments. Luckily, Google paid for everything, which is awesome. And yeah, we made the move. I mean, I think she found out on a Tuesday, and I've resigned on like that Friday, just because I wanted to give as much notice as possible because of the level I was at. But I wouldn't take it back for the world. Like, I would quit 14 more times if it meant like going through what we have gone through over here.
Yeah, and I know I listened to one of your podcasts where you mentioned it's like you have to take advantage of what life sort of presents to you, and go with the flow type of deal. And if something's in front of you and you have to face a challenge, that like ultimately life is just going to dictate itself to you, and you sort of have to make the decision to follow it. And I'm sure it wasn't easy to make a decision to California, which for a New Yorker, like I said, is not easy to get up and move all the way to the West Coast. What has that decision been like? I mean, how has it been leaving New York and like your whole transition out west?
Man, I'm a New Yorker forever, dude. Yeah. Like, it's completely different out here. I miss New York so much. That will be in the cards in the future. We will move back. San Francisco is beautiful. Like, the weather is ideal. It's 60 degrees all the time. It's why I wanted to live here. But the gentrification and the amount of wealth here has really displaced so much of the community out here. There's a lot of homeless people out here. Yeah. Because of that, from everything from not having the right jobs with tech coming in, like, I don't meet like teachers or lawyers or anybody of different industries. It's literally everyone in tech. So it's like engineers or product managers or, creatives like myself that work at these companies. But everyone else who's like from San Francisco, from the Bay, who are bankers or whatever, it's so hard for them. Like, people get displaced and then the rent is crazy, dude. Like, I can't even imagine having a family here. I would not be able to afford a family here.
Yeah.
And it's just me, my wife, and our puppy. And so, we've been super fortunate that we both work at tech companies and we can maintain our lifestyle, but it's just so different. And not to say that New York is not expensive, because it is.
Yeah.
But New York provides a lot more options as far as like housing. Like, I could be living in like the outskirts of Brooklyn and still jump on the MTA and get to work in 40 minutes. Out here, in order to buy a decent house that's affordable, you're looking like at an hour and a half, 2-hour car ride from like the main city. And so that's been a huge shock for me. And I've also felt really weird about it, because I feel like I'm part of the problem, right? I'm a transplant that's coming to the city, contributing to the economy here, working for these tech companies, and like, I'm paying that rent that they're continuously increasing. Like, and for me, like, it's problematic for me, and I constantly think about that, because I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to make sure I'm always helping, but it really puts things into perspective. And so that's why I give back in every way I can, and social impact is so important to me. And a lot of the reason why Trish Chat and all is so important, because it kind of ties back into that passion of mine. So yeah, it's so different. Does
it almost feel like you're like, having lived in New York, having lived in San Francisco, does it almost feel like you guys get like trapped in a bubble of like this perfect world that everything's good, everyone's accepting, there's different cultures and all this thing, when like, you don't really get to experience the other things? It's like a SUNY Cortland and people saying fucked up shit. Like, are there fucked up people in San Francisco that are against, maybe you and your wife, or you for being, Hispanic or something like that?
Yeah. So San Francisco is super white. I mean, it just is. They're pretty liberal, but it's almost like the fake liberal. It's hard to explain. It's like they're super down for the cause until it affects them, or until they have to really like dive into it, until it fucks with their money or their bottom line, right? There's a lot of these tech companies and other companies who are hiring a lot of folks in diversity, equity, and inclusion to come and like change their culture. But honestly, they just want you to come and like do a little bit, but not too much. And so it is completely different from New York, in that in New York, I can run into 14 different types of people on a city block, where here, no, like, I think we're the only Latinx people that live in our building. Like that, it's really white. And it just comes down to equity, right? Like, it's just access. It's just they're displacing a lot of the community. There's a lot of Mexican Americans that live out here that are in the outskirts of San Francisco, and there's bomb ass Mexican food out here, but they're not really in the city because they can't afford to. So as far as like people looking at us weird or discriminating against us because we're in a same-sex relationship, no, we don't really run into that. They celebrate that, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
But as far as our ethnicity, I think that we're looked at differently because of that, or like, oh, where are you from? Because there's just not, like, my wife has been trying to find Dominican folks out here forever. She's just, every time she sees them, she's like, oh my God, you're Dominican, She misses that so much, because that's what she grew up on. I grew up with Dominican food. I'm like, yo, I want Dominican food.
Is it hard to stay authentic to your guys' self without, like, people that you can, relate to and make a joke with, like a Dominican relating joke, or like people that won't understand the context of a New York joke or something like that? Like, can you make friends with people out there?
Yeah, so what's been awesome is that we have created an awesome community as far as the queer community. We've had, like, I have friends everywhere. Like, I have my basketball buddies that I play with once a week. I have my queer folks. I have some Latinx folks. They're not necessarily Dominican or from the Caribbean, but they're kind of like some of our best friends out here, like from Colombia and Puerto Rico. that are all from New York that have come here to work. So yes, I would say that like sarcasm isn't taken as like it's weird out here. They don't get it. And like me and my wife, because we're from New York, like sarcasm is like it's another language for us. So luckily we can vibe off of our jokes, and I get her jokes and she'll get mine. But yeah, it's a little hard to be like at work and I want to like shit on one of my coworkers. And, you know, I remember doing that the other day, and there was a girl sitting next to the guy that I was like shitting on or joking on. And she's like, why are you being so mean? And I was like, it's sarcasm. Like, I'm not being, you know? So yes, that is definitely a challenge. And I very much miss that.
Yeah, I think I'm similar in the same sense. And a lot of New Yorkers are in that sense, where I find that in Illinois here, it's just like, I'm not making fun of someone. Like, if I'm joking on you, it's because I appreciate you. It's because I think you're cool. I think you could handle it. Whereas like, it doesn't translate well outside of New York, where if someone's from San Francisco or Illinois, like, people sometimes get pretty sensitive. So you have to know like who you're joking with. Whereas in New York, we're just rugged. We get like whatever you're gonna throw at me, you know. And I guess it's important
how to do it.
Exactly. And it's important you have your wife there, because she understands that, so you guys could probably banter off each other, which leads into obviously what I wanted to talk to you about, and what I've been mentioning is a podcast that you've been doing for a while now with your wife, called the Trish Podcast. If you want to talk about that a little bit, and let people know what the purpose of that is, and the importance of that, because I've really enjoyed it recently.
Totally, man. Yeah, and thanks again for having me on to talk about this. So we started Trish Chat back in 2017. So it's in honor of our friend, my best friend who passed away 3 years ago. And it started out as meetups in parks, coffee shops, and the whole purpose of it is that Trish, she was known as someone that you could just kick it with. You could talk to her about anything. Politics, law, same-sex marriage, anything, literally. And she always made room for you. And it's unfortunate that not everyone has a Trish in their life. A lot of us depend on our romantic partners to be kind of our persons, to be that, where you can be your authentic self, and you can cry on their shoulder, or they can just you can talk through anything with them. But Trish was that friend that you could just go to and she wouldn't judge you. And so when she passed, my wife and I thought we want to honor her in a way that's authentic to us, and that she would, she'd be okay with. And so we started out doing these meetups where we'd invite a bunch of people to meet up at coffee shops and parks, and we would facilitate conversation. So it would be a Saturday afternoon. It'd be like, you bring you and your friend, and we talk about, what is joy? We talk about joy and what that actually is, and what is love, and how do you feel loved? And, we'd get really deep, and that would just be starting the conversation, but we'd allow the conversation to go where it went. And we noticed that a lot of people would come and start just ranting off their feelings, and people would get emotional. And they would just say, wow, I needed to let that out. I've been holding that in all week. I had such a shitty week. I've been thinking about this. And they were just so grateful for the space to be able to do that, because there was no judgment there. It was kind of like therapy on steroids, group therapy. And we're like, shit, we're onto something here. This is awesome. So we would do it once a month. My wife usually facilitated, and it started growing. And then we ended up moving. And we're like, I was thinking, I love the meetups. I would ideally continue that, but I want to scale this out to reach more people. And so we thought, let's create a podcast. I'd never done a podcast. I had no idea how to make one. So it entailed a lot of research, as you know, you do your own. But yeah, so it just started there, and we're like, we want to talk about real stuff. And so the mission of Trish Chat is to normalize vulnerability. I think there aren't many spaces where you can actually do that. Vulnerability is typically, the way people usually see it, is as a weakness. Like, people don't want to be vulnerable because they don't have the toolkit. They weren't taught how to do that.
And it's done behind closed doors normally too. Like, it's not out in the open.
Right. And if you think about when you get together with your friends, right? You're typically going to a bar, a game, they're coming over to, like, share a meal. And if it's in a group setting, you're not really going to dive in. You ask them how they're doing, and it's usually, I'm good. How are you? There's no opportunity to actually dive into it because there's either alcohol involved, too many people. And we noticed that was a trend happening. And so we wanted to just dive into that stuff. And so our topics are everything from being queer in the Latinx community, which is a huge topic, identities in the workplace, fatherhood, mommy issues, being uncomfortable, vulnerability, therapy, like all the taboo shit that people don't want to talk about, like we talk about. And we bring on guests who want to shed some light on that. My favorite part about doing it is not only that we're honoring Trish, but I love having people on who've never done a podcast and seeing them like light up. Like, they're so nervous before, and they're like, oh my God, what if I say the wrong thing? Which you'll never say the wrong thing, because as long as you're being true to yourself, it's what you feel.
Exactly.
And then seeing them change through the conversation at the end, they're like, holy crap, that was so therapeutic. I love that. I want to do it again. That is honestly so awesome to watch, because that's the point here. It's for people to just let loose and understand that, like, we have so much more in common than we think. And it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to create spaces for other people to see that it's okay and it's normal. Because if I'm vulnerable with you, chances are you're likely going to be vulnerable with me, not only to like return the favor, but because I created a safe space where I trust you. Now you're like, oh, now we can relate, So yeah, man, we've been doing that now for the podcast. Officially, it'll be a year in like a month, couple weeks actually. And it's been taken off really well, man. I mean, we don't do any marketing for it. It's just strictly our network. We're on Instagram. I'm looking to see where else we can kind of scale out. And it's been word of mouth, and like some friends have asked us to come in to facilitate conversation within their companies, and like being paid for that. And, we had a really rad one on identities in the workplace where like they had the partners of the firm were there, and we were talking about people being Black in America, being queer in America, and how they feel at work. And literally they were being so vulnerable in front of their partners that they were like so shook, and they were asking questions. And it was a beautiful dialogue. Like, that's the point of this, a dialogue. So it's been great, man. Just a lot of learnings, and it's honestly helped me be more comfortable talking about vulnerability myself.
Yeah, I think you guys do an amazing job. I think it's great. Like, it's official. There's the music in the front, and it's funny because I had went back to some old episodes too, and you could see the audio is different from like the beginning to now.
Man,
it's just butter.
Step the game up, bro.
Yeah, no, you guys do great. And like, so you work, like, where do you find the time to do it? Do you have a set schedule of how you do it? Do you, like, does an episode come out every week, or do you know the topics beforehand, what you're going to talk about? Talk about like the process of the podcast a little bit, and like how you come to a decision of what you're going to talk about with your
audience. So typically we, in the beginning, we would brainstorm a bunch of topics we wanted to touch on, and we actually started off by doing it on Instagram, IGTV, where we would videos.
Yeah.
But then we're just like, let's put this in podcast form and get out on Spotify and iTunes. But we typically love to record like on a Sunday, or I remember you saying this in one year, like a Tuesday, a day that isn't like too heavy. But typically on a Sunday. And I personally like to like jam in a bunch of episodes at once, so I'm not doing it every week because life happens, and I want to make sure we're good. But nah, man, we just sit on the couch and we have a whiteboard, and we're like, all right, like we literally run this like a business. We're like, okay, these are the agenda items. Like, what do we want to talk about? Who do we want to have on? Because we don't always have guests, right? Like, it's a privilege to have people on, but sometimes it's just her and I. And so, she's actually in charge of like the social media content and making sure that's good. I'm in charge of actually producing the podcast. So I invested in all this equipment. which I love because it just, as you heard, like the audio is just so much better.
Yeah, it's crisp. You guys do a good job.
And, you know, luckily I actually use Final Cut, which Trish actually got me because she was working at Apple when she was around. So I edit and make sure, like, you know, the episode sounds all good. But yeah, we pick our episode and then we just throw on some the mics and we go. We're actually going to probably record an episode after this, mostly because we're going to New York tomorrow. So we got to get that in before we leave. But yeah, she'll come up with the questions typically, or if she's too busy, I will. But our format's pretty much the same around the our episodes, as you probably noticed. You know, we'll do a quick, you know, what are we doing? How did we learn about this topic? You know, how has it changed? And just shed some light on like what that is. And sometimes we just go off script and we do our thing. And I think we have a good flow. I was a little nervous since, you know, we're married in a relationship that we'd get into like arguments or it wouldn't flow, and mixing business and personal life can be tricky sometimes. But honestly, dude, like, she's so awesome. She's a great facilitator. She drives the conversation so well, and we just complement each other really nicely.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, because like on my channel, my wife will come on, like, so I'm basically just the bare bones of this. I don't do shit like after it's done. I know how to upload it to YouTube, but my wife has the thing on Tuesdays, like Molly's Mind will do a little bit, and she enjoys it, and I think it's great for our relationship because, you know, it gives us an opportunity to sit down and talk to each other about, you know, like a topic that we find interesting. So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you was, how is it working with your wife? Like, do you feel, you know, it strengthens your relationship? Do you get off air and later on while you're eating dinner, you're like, oh, we could talk about this, talk about that? Like, how has that been on your guys' relationship working together?
For sure. Yeah, I feel super blessed that, like, we work really well together. You know, in the beginning, it was a little frustrating just because we had to find our flow. And I'm kind of a perfectionist. That's kind of, I've let that go since then. But, you know, I want to make sure that I feel confident, she feels confident, and that we're doing exactly like what we said we were going to do. I don't want to just push content because we said we were going to push content. So it took a couple of tries for us to kind of find our flow, and there were some arguments there in the beginning. But after that, after we got our flow, like, yeah, we'll be sitting at dinner and we'll be like, yo, that episode was like fire. And she's like, yo, that was, you know, like, talk our New York slang, and we're just like, yeah, that was lit. And so she'll touch on like what she liked about it, and we'll reflect. And then sometimes, you know, I get like my greatest ideas in the shower, so I like come out, we're gonna like, let's do the episode. That's what happened with the last episode. I was like, let's do it on being comfortable, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And she's like, okay. And I was like, let's interview Lindsay. And so it just,
she was awesome, by the way.
Yeah,
super
thanks,
smart,
man. Yeah, she was dope. And so, yeah, it's we'll be driving and I'll bring it up. But at the same time, it's important because we're running this business together, which I still see it as a business. It's a passion project, but like the goal would be to make it a business. And because we work in the same type of field and things like that, it's important to like separate that and like make sure that we're spending time together, not talking about Trish Chat or work and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's been good because it's created an opportunity for us to get creative about the other stuff we should be talking about. Like, you know, sometimes we go out to dinner for date night and it's like, all right, we can't talk about Trish Chat, we can't talk about bills, we can't talk about Baxter because Baxter's our puppy and it's like a kid. It's like we have to take him to the puppy school. We got to buy him, you know, treats or whatever. And so that's off the table. And it's like, okay, we've been together for 8 years. What are we going to talk about? You know? So it's been nice because it's really made us focus on like our relationship outside of all the other shit that we love to do together, which I love.
Yeah. One thing you guys talk about a lot, and this is a conversation, just being honest, like me and my wife have spoken about with 2 daughters now, is therapy. And it's something that gets brought up in your conversations a lot, and you guys talk about the importance of it. Can you speak on that a little bit? Because I know me and my wife have conversations of sometimes maybe going to, you know, marriage therapy, whether, you know, like we have a great relationship. She's going to be the woman I'm with for the rest of my life. But she feels it could be good for us to get there and talk. And I think that we can figure out problems ourselves, that we don't need a therapist. because everybody goes through different things. What have you found in therapy? And I don't know exactly if you've been to therapy or not, but you guys talk about it a lot. What's your feelings on that?
I 100% support therapy, individual and couples therapy. I say a lot in our episodes, it is a privilege to go to therapy because it costs money. But I've been in individual therapy quite some time. I wasn't individual therapy in college, but I wouldn't take it that serious because I wasn't diving into really much. But as last 5 years, it's such a big part of my life. I will be in therapy for the rest of my life because I think that it's an outlet. It allows you to speak to somebody outside of your relationship, outside of your life, who's not tied to it, who can be real. Like, my therapist is awesome. She keeps it 100%. And I love that. And I tell her that all the time. Like, you're a mirror to me. Like, don't bullshit me. And she doesn't. And it honestly has helped me reflect on who I am. And, she always asks me, she's like, who do you want to be? Like, who does Jess want to be? And like, make sure your decisions are lining up to that. And so I will forever be in therapy. I think it's really important, especially because life is so crazy as you get married and have kids. And like, I think for me, I suppressed so much as a kid because I had to, being raised by a single mom. Like, my parents got divorced. Like, I haven't seen my dad since I was 10 years old. There's a lot of suppression there that went on. It's like, I don't need my dad, whatever. That shit comes up with you. That shit catches up. It doesn't matter how much you push it away. You could be 80 years old and that shit's going to come up. And for me, I made a decision that I didn't want that to come up later. I wanted to tackle it now. And so I went to therapy, and, a lot of that stuff did come up. And once it comes up, you can't kind of close the door on that. You kind of have to handle it. But the beauty in that is that when you have a grasp on it and you start understanding it, you start understanding why you are the way you are and why you react the way you do. And, why do you want to be loved a certain way versus the way you love? Which then leads me to like marriage therapy. We've definitely been to it. And I would, I'm biased, but I don't think you have to have issues to go to marriage therapy. I think it's smart to go when you guys are in a good place because there's a lot more patience and you are both aligned on like what you want out of it. Hopefully you are.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder when you're not in a good place and you're starting out, because if you have one person who's not for it and the other person is, a lot of therapists are going to be like, you have to like meet in the middle, at least with that decision, in order to make progress. And I find that it's super helpful to have a third party in the room who you could think you're like the best communicators, and you'll sit in the room and realize you ain't shit. Like, everything you thought was right is like wrong. Like, we've definitely learned through marriage therapy and through my wife goes to individual therapy, that doing our work separately and then together is like hand in hand. I think that it doesn't hurt to do that, especially if you plan on being together for a long time. I mean, it sounds like you and your wife have been together for quite some time.
Yeah, I think we've been together 10 years, married 3 now,
That's
something
awesome,
like that. I'm terrible with dates.
Hopefully she doesn't watch this. No.
Yeah, she'll kill me. There's so many dates to remember. I got my 2 daughters'
course.
birthdays I got to remember. I got to remember anniversaries.
Yep.
And
you got your hands tied. And
there's too much like space in here.
Yeah, I feel that, dude. I feel that. My wife and I have been together for 8 years. And so, the goal is to be together forever, right? You just never know, right? Like, I can't tell what I'm going to be doing at 50. But what I'm trying to get at is that we've been together through different points in our life. I was completely different when we started dating at 22 years old to now that I'm 30. I'm not the same person. Fortunately, we have grown like aligned and like on the same path as far as what we want in life, but sometimes that's not the case, right? Those midlife crises, like, those shits are real. Like, I've seen people go through that. I have family members who are not together anymore because they never dealt with it, or they've been together too long and like they just thought like, I'm gonna push this down, this is just the way my life is gonna be. But not to say that just because we go to therapy like it's gonna be all good, but I think that we're just trying to get ahead of it, in the sense that like we want to make sure that we're being authentic in our relationship and that we're giving ourselves the best shot so that we can show up good for each other, especially as we're thinking about starting a family and like I've been through everything with my wife. We've moved together. My wife doesn't have a relationship with her family, so just being there for her through that. She's been there through my loss with Trish. Like we've been through shit together, and like I'm super fortunate that we still are together, because that stuff really, it pushes you, So I promote therapy all the time. I would highly recommend it if you can afford it. And it doesn't hurt to try. If you go and it's just not for you, that's cool. But also understand that with therapy, like you have to find your style. Like it's kind of like dating. You got to go and try it out and make sure that your therapist is like vibing with what you're looking for. Because sometimes you just want to go to therapy and talk, and you don't want to hear anything. Sometimes you want to go and find frameworks from people or for someone to validate you. So you need to make sure you're finding that. Like for me, it was important that I found a queer, I ideally would want a queer woman of color as a therapist to understand all of my different identities. But my therapist is a woman of color, so she gets like the ethnicity and the cultural background and the things that I go through in the Bay. But yeah, so it's super important to like take your time with finding the right fit.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I try to think that I can reason and understand, and I was having this conversation with someone the other day with I try to like please everybody else that's around me and like make everybody else happy, but then the one person, like my wife, is the one that I take for granted the most, because I know she'll be there, so like, and I don't know if it's just the stubbornness in me, but I always look at a therapist and I'm like, they probably got their own issues they're going through. They're probably the most fucked up, and I'm going to go pay and sit with them and talk about issues that I'm having. But I got to stop being stubborn, and I think it would be a good thing. But that's why I like doing the podcast with my wife, and that's why I was super curious how it was with you and your wife doing something together, because I just feel it's super beneficial to have time to just sit down and do something together and talk. So I love the dynamic that you guys have in your podcast. I think you do a great job. It's just, it's a lot of time doing stuff outside of work, even passion projects. Because like we said earlier, like work consumes so much of our lives that it's hard to find something that you mentioned, like having a schedule of like waking up, not checking your phone, doing something, like working out, and then go and check your phone, making breakfast, like having a structure, to not just be controlled with like, all right, I gotta wake up, go to work, come home. Do I have time to do this?
Right.
No. Like,
and I can't imagine with kids.
It's
like,
hard to, yeah, kids throw a wrench into that shit too. It makes it super hard. But like staying true to yourself and like staying true to the schedule that you give yourself is something that I've done a good job in the past, but need to do a better job going forward. Like, do you feel like you guys have a good structure now in place to do everything that you're doing?
I think so. I'd have to ask my wife. But for me, like, I don't have kids. I'm sure that's going to change once we do. I touched on it in the episode, but like, I need to work out. Like, that's just part of who I am. And that honestly allows me to have space for other things. Like, I'm able to zone out and like really get my blood going and my heart rate going. And I'm fortunate I have a gym in my building. So like, again, there's a lot of privilege in my routine, but I think because everything is so convenient, like my gym is in my building. I'm a 4-minute walk from work. I bought all the podcast equipment. It's in my house. My co-host lives with me. She's super flexible, and we're able to put our puppy in puppy school, which is like down the block from us. So like, it's all about convenience, and like we spend the money on that because it's important to us. Once things change and we have kids, we might not have the luxury to be able to do that, so that might shift. But I think that, to your point, it is super important to stay authentic to yourself, and like, if you're not taking care of you, you're not going to be able to take care of anyone. And so if the podcast for me is super important, then I got to take care of me, and that means working out, making sure I'm eating all my meals, making sure that I'm getting my shit done at work, spending time with my wife, and then like the podcast can happen. But I think if all those things weren't aligned, I would be all over the place. There would be no consistency or routine for me to follow, because I didn't set myself up that way.
Yeah, no, that's a good. It's hard to it's hard to do all that, but if you stay true to it, you'll reap the benefits of it. And I think a lot of good will come from having that structure, and I need to do a better job.
Do you feel like you have that
but,
routine down?
No, definitely don't. And I used to, I used to go to the gym, and I used to, be very regimented on what I was eating, and going to sleep at certain times. But it's navigating that, and I think things always change. Like you said, if you guys eventually have kids, it'll be totally different than how things are now. You won't have the freedom of a Sunday free or something like that, because you'll be with your daughter or son. So it's like just figuring it out, and I think that's how life is. It's just everything's constant, always changing, and it's just adapting to all that. But being like authentic to what you're doing, like if you guys really love Trish Chat, I love doing these chats that I do. But just figuring out, like, what is your guys' goal for Trish Chat? Because like someone asked me this about my podcast. They're like, what you should at least write down or know what you want it to be, and I didn't have an answer for that, and I was just like, I sort of enjoy the organicness of what's happening. Like I had someone reach out to me who was the president of like the Bernie Sanders student thing, and so like I feel like we mentioned earlier, stuff is just happening with it like organically, and setting like a gold star of what I want it to be would sort of not be true to myself, but also you do need something like that. So do you guys have a plan for your podcast, or is it almost the same type of thing where it's just like see where it goes?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I want to touch on is you mentioned you had just listened to the last episode with Lindsay, who's a life coach, was talking about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and something that she said that really stuck with me, and
which I don't like doing, by the way. So to start interrupting,
I feel that, man. It's not supposed to be fun, but. I think what the one thing that stuck out that she said was, we need to stop focusing so much on the outcome and just being, just allowing the process and the journey to be, and like we'll manifest whatever it is that we want. We don't have to sit there and be like, it needs to be this, because then we put ourselves in a box, right? We're so focused on like, for me, like let's say, I want Trish Chat to blow up. I want to have 50,000 followers by the end of next year, and like I want to quit my job and just do this. Like, yeah, that's great to have those goals, but if I focus so much on that and I don't actually let the process be what it is, then I'm going to miss out on what is actually happening, and I'm not going to manifest what I actually want, because I'm so focused on like making that thing happen that might not be what is supposed to happen. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you, man. Like people ask me that all the time, especially, it's actually really rad. Like we go out and we meet friends of friends, and they'll come up to us and they'll be like, yo, you guys are the hosts from Trish Chat. Like we feel like mini celebrities. It's pretty awesome.
It's cool.
And they're like, so what's the goal? What do you want to do? And I'm like, I mean, I'd love to make this a business. I'd love for this to be something where it could be my full-time job, where I don't have to have another job and I could literally focus on, I'd love to be a podcast producer and just do it, and create like meetups and podcast episodes and all those things. But at the same time, listening to Lindsay the other day really had me reflecting on that and just being like, you know what, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I'm going to make time for it when I can. I'm going to have on awesome guests, and if those are the cards I'm dealt, then great. Like I'm never gonna turn down an opportunity. Like if somebody comes to me and like, hey, we want to blow this up, we want to we want to invest in this, hell yeah, I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna look at what the deal is, but I don't think I'm gonna put so much pressure on myself, because in the beginning I was like, oh, I gotta get all these followers, I gotta get all these likes, I gotta do all this stuff, and I started hating like those coming up to those episodes, because I just didn't have the energy, because I spent it so much on the outcome. And now I'm just like, we're small, there's no marketing behind it, and like that's okay. Like I'm gonna lean on my resources. I'm gonna go on my buddy's show. I'm gonna meet different people. I'm gonna say yes to more things, and hopefully it becomes that. But if not, it's all good.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, and I give you a lot of props, because it takes a lot of time to figure out, posting on Instagram and like, you know, tagging things and writing descriptions in the I don't know, iTunes and all that stuff. But like I said, you guys do amazing. It's really good for everybody listening. They should definitely check it out. So yeah, so what's next for you guys? You said you eventually want to maybe go back to New York. Is it that, because I'm in the same boat. I've been in Illinois for 5 years now. For anybody who's moved out of like a state they lived in, I miss New York. I miss the people there. But I think it's also awesome to leave your comfort zone and live somewhere else and meet new people and understand different people and learn about new people. What's the plan for you and your wife? Do you envision getting back to New York?
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely answer that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about like your experience in Illinois and like what you plan on doing, if you're cool with sharing.
Yeah,
dude. So like for us, we're getting older, right? And so we want a family and we want to be able to purchase a house or a bigger space. And we're just not able to do that here. My mom's getting older. I'm really, really close to my family, and I want to be around my mom while she's still able to go places. And like, I want her to see my kids grow up and just be a part of her world. And New York is home. Like I went away to learn a lot about myself. I went away because I said I was going to do it, and I did it. But I think there's beauty in going back as a different version of yourself and making sure that everything you learn, from the boundaries to who you are, that, you know, you're able to do that wherever you go. And so I think, yes, it's in the near future, probably closer than many people think. We're constantly looking at places in New York and being like, let's just go. Once the opportunities are right, we'll definitely move out there. And I think the plan is move out there for a little bit and then, you know, start looking at houses and set some roots down. I've moved so much in the last few years. I'm tired. I want to buy furniture that's not going to move. I want to be able to say, this is what my living room's going to look like. This is what my podcast room is going to look like. Like, I want to have that. And I have a really close group of friends. Our friends are actually, we have mutual friends, and you know, I'm very big on family, and my friends are my family. I wanted to get to the point where my boys can just walk into my house, and, you know, vice versa. Like, we can just spend time together. And so that's the plan, man. Get back, set some roots, have some kids, see what happens with Trish Chat, see what happens with our careers, and, you know, be okay with the winters that we left, because it's been actually nice to not have snow, and it never rains here, so our weather is so awesome, and we're constantly hiking and finding new places to visit. But
let me ask you real quick, do you think that helps? Like, I don't know. I'm not, and this is an age-old question, I'm not super motivated to do shit when it's so cold outside. With it being 60 degrees and nice and beautiful, are you more inclined to like have that schedule of waking up, working out, doing your podcast, eating right, going to the park, chilling, you know, like...
That's a good question, man. I think it's something I worry about. That's why I have to be smart about where I land. Like, if we're not going to live in like a luxury building and have a gym, I have to live a block or two from a gym. I think, the winters are real in New York, and probably worse in Illinois. I definitely remember being like super lazy and being like, I'm not going outside. Like, even thinking about walking back through our dog, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to be so cold and I'm going to be colder. But I think it's about setting ourselves up and being realistic and saying, okay, if these things are important, we need to find an apartment by a gym, by a subway, parks, so on and so forth. And, you know, we're both from New York, so it's gonna be a little bit of an adjustment, but like, at the end of the day, like, we're natives, and like, that doesn't leave us. So I think it's gonna be fun and interesting. I'll definitely report back once we're back how it actually happens. Hopefully we move back during the summer, whatever year, and it's an easier transition. But I think it's gonna be fun. The rain part is gonna be probably the toughest, because I love that it doesn't rain, although it's not good for the environment here. But
are you guys pretty politically involved? Do you get involved with politics and watch what's going on in the whole political
I think
world?
For me, it's the way Trump has kind of forced people's hands, right? Like I had to really learn a lot more than I typically have. I have been watching the debates. I wouldn't say I'm completely informed on like the laws that they're trying to change or anything like that. But I do follow. I think it's important to vote. I constantly bring it up. I don't ask people who they're voting for, but I do say it is important to vote. I've been researching more on like local elections. I have, friends of friends who are actually running for office on the local level. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez kind of changed the game for our community, and she's awesome. I love following her. I actually watched a bunch of stuff on her today because she was doing some interviews. So yeah, I'm super. It's super important. This election year is obviously even more important, and I'm excited and scared about what's going to happen because you just hear so many things. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a scary time, man. It's a scary time for marginalized communities. It's a scary time for immigrants. It's a scary time for queer people, and many more, many more. It's unfortunate that this is just the way it is right now, and I'm hoping that this election year brings change because people are tired, man. People are really tired. And so, yeah, that's as much as my involvement has been. I do just try to stay informed. I wish I could do more. And I think that's the next thing on my list on how to get more involved.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, like being from New York, living in San Francisco, you could fall into like these bubbles of like everything seems comfortable, and then you get outside of that and you go travel to, I don't know, Florida or something like that, and you just find out that like there's so much like other craziness and so much shit going on that like you don't even realize. And to your point, like while like San Francisco seems like such a liberal place, a lot of these executives who are running these tech companies are like conservative and like do think a certain way. So they might put on one face that they're for, gay marriage or global warming and all this shit, but like in reality, they're voting the other way. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think it's just a crazy time, and I don't know. It's scary, but
you've been learning a little bit more about it, right, through your buddy, his experience.
I've that's the world I've sort of started to get pulled into, and it's cool because I've really started to learn more about Bernie Sanders and understand that like he's what we are. I feel like in a podcast form where he's authentic and he's true to what he says, whereas a lot of other politicians or executives will tell you one thing and they'll just be two-faced and not actually follow through with what they're talking about. And I've started to learn that, and I've started to, and like I said, that's the direction I'm getting pulled in. And I don't mind it because, I'm okay with talking about him because I believe in what he believes in.
I'm a Bernie fan for sure. Yeah, he's definitely changing the game and like talking about things that we want, right? Like we want all the things he's talking about. I hope that he does win and he's able to do that, but he's one of the only candidates that has been authentic throughout his whole career, right?
I think that's the way we're just going now, and even with podcasts in general, is just authenticity, and that's something I respect about the Trish Chat is you guys are authentic. The people you have on are authentic. That dude Will, like I felt him, being a father. Like his stories is just like authenticity is the way that you're gonna get people to trust you. That's how things are gonna grow. That's why people like me. That's why people like your podcast when they talk to you is just the authenticity and realness. There's no bullshit. There's no sugarcoating shit. There's no, we got to stop this to talk about our sponsor, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you have a sponsor maybe one day, it'll be something that like you genuinely believe in. Yeah. So I think that's the way we're going. I think people having a podcast are a great thing. I don't know. That's my thought on that. I think authenticity is the realest thing that we could get. And you see with Trump that a lot of people that follow him, they're not authentic. And I'm sure you see it in San Francisco, the people that are just, phony people, you know, that you have conversations with, and you're just like, you're phony, like, get out of here, you know. And those people get exposed, and
I think the problem is that, like, obviously there's many problems with Trump, but I think what frustrates me the most is that it's not about politics anymore. It's about human rights. And if you aren't affected by it, or don't have communities or family or friends that are affected by it, it doesn't matter to you. And that shit just blows my mind, man. Like, if a candidate came to me and was like, you know, I'm for all your rights, but fuck everyone in the middle of the country, I'm not going to vote for that person, because that's not right? Like, that they're singling people out that are communities that need help. And I'm just not, like, for me, going back to authenticity, like, that's just not what I'm about. But these Trump supporters, which I get, you know, in the beginning, it was just like not educated people, and he was promising a lot of things to those communities, which I get. They need help. So they're going to vote for that candidate. But now at this point, all the shit that he's done, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, there is no case that you can give me that I'm going to be like, oh, that makes sense. That's why you're a Trump. Like, I don't care if you're a billionaire, if you're in the tax bracket that he helps. At the end of the day, when you tell me you're a Trump supporter, you don't give a shit about me. You don't give a shit about those communities. And, like, that just, for me, that tells me a lot about who that person is. Because it's not about politics. It is human rights. And it's disgusting, the stuff that he's been doing and getting away with. And it's brought out the worst in people. And this has existed before Trump. He just brought it out in people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And just to tie a bow on it and say one more time, I think you guys, you know, have compassion, and I think you do a good job of letting your guest open up and talk freely, and you're understanding, and you give people a good voice to express things that they've got going on in their life that they might not have the opportunity to talk about somewhere else. So I'm a big fan of your guys' stuff. I'm not even just saying that. Like, there's some podcasts of my friends that I listen to that I can't make it through, and I'll tell them that it was good or whatnot. But I've listened to, like, I think I'm like 5 episodes deep, and I'm like searching through for stuff that I enjoy, topics that are of interest to me.
Is there anything on your?
So you guys are doing a great job.
Is there anything on your side that you'd love to see, like things that you might be going through, or your communities are going through, or things that are taboo that, you know, you'd love to learn more about?
I thought the marriage one was good. I mean, like, obviously, with Will and his fatherhood experience was something that resonated with me. You know, getting all the topics that you guys have spoken about, being uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, is something that I'm experiencing myself. Like, even when I used to work out, like, I would always work out to the point where I felt good, you know, and then I would just reason with it afterwards and be like, I'm good. I got a good workout in. I'm sweating. But then my wife would be like, but you could have, like, pushed it more, you know, like see where you're limited is, you know, it's not where you're telling yourself. There's way more fuel. Like, so, like, I don't know. No, the topics you guys are talking about are all relatable things, happiness, and, you know, you guys touch upon some good things. So no, there's not really anything that I would tell you to, like, elsewise do. Not that you need my fucking advice anyway.
Listen, we get a lot of our content and our episodes off of, like, our community. So, you know, if you ever think of anything, we're totally open to that. We've been toying with the idea of doing a marriage 2.0, just because we want to make sure we're staying relevant, and we've learned a lot since the first time we talked about it. So I think that's definitely in the cards for us. But I do want to.
I think we're super. My bad. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, I think we're super unique. Like, in New York, like, especially you living in the actual city. I lived about, like, 15 minutes outside of the city in Westchester, but, like, we've seen so much stuff, and we've met so many different types of people. Like, you know, whether gay, straight, black, white, Hispanic, like, special needs. Like, there's just so many different people that we've come across in New York City. And going to college upstate New York, where it's a little bit more rural, where, like, I think a lot of people listening to us, like, haven't experienced a lot of that stuff, and that's why they're drawn to us. You know, they're fascinated by the way we speak, because I think while, like, people look at, Washington Heights as like, oh, like there's gangs, it's bad there. Like, I think there's so much culture that comes out of there, and like that's where all of like the art and swag starts. Like that's where all the shit gets stolen from. And it's like that's all us starting that. So like I think we have a unique perspective on things. We've seen so much stuff that people are interested in what we've seen, and our outlook on how to go about a certain situation, if that makes
Absolutely,
any sense.
man. And it's just the surface. I'm looking forward to diving into more of my experiences, especially in Washington Heights. I've had a gun put to my head before. Like I haven't even talked about that and like the experience with that. So for sure. Definitely. But I actually want to go back because I'm really curious. You mentioned like you guys been thinking about potentially moving back, or maybe that's just been a thought, but would love to hear like how has your experience been in Illinois, and like what is next? Like, do you have a dream plan for the next?
Yeah, so I don't know how it is in your relationship, but like I feel like in a relationship there's like a decision maker and there's someone who rocks with like what the decision's going to be. Obviously like we both have our input and what's going to be a say, but I think my wife Molly, she's way more regimented in like a structure, so like she knows she wants to be married by here, have kids by here, like get a house. Well, I've always been the type where it's just been like I've lived in my parents' basement, and like I'll just go with the flow, and it's worked out for me. I've gotten good jobs, I've met awesome people, but same thing with my podcast. There's been no direction, there's nothing, no gold star. So with that being said, I think we've been in our house now for 3 years. We lived in an apartment when we first moved out to Illinois, and then my wife had a plan, and I've obviously been aboard on the conversations to move into a house, have kids. But it's tough at our age. Like I miss my family. I miss my family in New York, but like we said, it's expensive in New York. So I think if opportunity presents itself in New York that we can afford a house and make that move, find the right jobs for both of us, then we do that. But we have good jobs out here. We just had a newborn daughter. So I think the plan, yes, in maybe the next 2 years or something, is to get back to New York. But again, who knows? Like it's life is crazy, and I don't know. I've been pretty emotional recently. Like I've never really had anybody close to me pass away, and my grandma's pretty sick, and I could see her on the decline, and it's like pretty bad. So that's been like I've just been super emotional lately, and that's just making me appreciate things a little bit more. I've been eating like shit, so now I'm gonna start eating differently. Like, so I don't know. There's so much stuff that happens to you. Like you don't know what's gonna happen in 6 months. Something could happen that you have to go back to New York, or you get an opportunity in San Francisco that you can't pass up, and you guys stay out there and have your family out there. So like I want to be back in New York, but I don't know what's going to happen,
Totally.
I don't know if that even answers the question.
What, and like, are you enjoying Illinois for the most part? Like community wise?
Yeah, I love
things
it.
to do.
You find things to do. Like, I think people come into your life, friends. Like, I don't think we actively pursue new friends or whatnot. But my mother-in-law watches a couple kids, and their parents are around our age, so we become friends with them. But it's about, strengthening my relationship with my wife, having a better relationship with my daughters, and from that, being successful at my job, my podcast. But yeah, no, we love it out here. It's cool. It's nice to have a house. It's nice to have some land. We got 3 dogs.
3 dogs? Damn,
and
kid.
It's crazy, and I'm ready to open up the door and just let them run away because they're fucking annoying as shit, which I'm sure sometimes with your dog. Yeah, it's crazy.
Props to you, man. That's crazy. That's awesome. Super blessed though. That's great.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. His life is so. It's just a weird thing. It's so fragile, man. The Kobe Bryant stuff shook me up.
Yeah.
But I think just reconnecting with people is super important. Like I'm very appreciative of you being cool and coming on the podcast, because I'm always nervous when I ask someone, because they might say no or who. But
that was super
I
brave,
think
man.
that's
Thank you. I appreciate. Like, I mean, I
yeah, of course,
appreciate more that you asked me, and like, I feel honored that you'd want me on. So thank you so much for like being vulnerable and actually asking me that.
for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I hope everybody checks out your podcast. The views vary on how many people watch this, but there are people that watch. Hopefully, people made it to the end. But I would definitely. It's Trish Chat on
Yep,
iTunes,
Trish
right?
Chat podcast on iTunes, Spotify. If you just Google it, it'll pop up. Yep.
Yeah, it's super insightful. You guys are super knowledgeable. You're always very. You guys know what you're talking about. So I give you a lot of props and thank you for coming on. I'm going to continue to keep listening. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, man, just want to thank you again for having me on. This has been super fun, super dope. I didn't know how it was going to go as far as the flow, but you do an awesome job. I love the work you're doing. Ever since we reconnected, I've been binging on it. So I've been going far back and checking it out. So I'll continue doing that. Love to promote it as well. But yeah, dude, let's keep in touch. Would love to
Absolutely.
grab a beer or something next time I'm in Illinois or you're in New York. Hopefully we're back at the same time.
Yeah, that's one thing that I always keep like. I kept thinking about it. Was just like I feel like I feel like we knew each other in Cortland, but it always just was like a head nod and like it never like a real deep like conversation, get to know you, and that's my fault. You know, like I felt like I wanted to say hi to everybody, but I knew you were like, you know, cool. You seemed like I don't know. You seemed like someone I wanted to connect with, and I never, you know, pursued that. You know, so I'm happy we reconnected now.
Absolutely,
We're friends
I'm
now.
sure we knew each other in the past life or something. But
Yes,
if you're ever out in the Bay, I'd love to take you guys out, show you around. But for sure, thanks again, man.
Definitely, Jess, this was awesome. I'm going to continue listening. So Trish Chat podcast, check it out. Check out Jess. Check out their Instagram. Is Trish Chat on
Yep, Trish
IG?
Chat podcast, all one word.
Cool. Jess, thank you very much. And I'll talk
All right,
to you
man.
soon.
Later.